glad to have you back and participating in the financial services track. As I said earlier, what we're going to do now is get into a little bit more detail in terms of the, overcoming some of the challenges that we discussed and how we see from our clients the type of approaches that help them. So I'm Ann Kuelzow, and
I'm John Payne. So I look after sales engineering in the UK and Ireland for InterSystems.
All right. So let's get on with the show. Okay. So we spoke about the collaboration with fintechs, and as I mentioned, there's 26,000 fintechs. About 150 of those are valued at $1 billion or more. So it's, it's growing, right? They're out there, there's adoption by consumers, and as was mentioned by our panelist, there's also the opportunity to collaborate, which will drive innovation. It will mitigate some of the risk internally in terms of having to bring in a new source of technology, integrate whatever into the environment. It gives you the opportunity to have value between the two parties, and so some symbiotic relationship. With the fintech market and having so many fintechs in the marketplace, we were curious to understand what are the challenges. What are the fintechs facing in terms of the types of challenges in working with the customers or the established institutions or banks. And we surveyed about 500 executives, and the number one challenge, 81% said, was around data. So what this means is not only in terms of being able to work with the banks, there were 40% actually said they're unable to connect to the applications, the data, and the legacy systems. So although there's the desire to work together, there's the difference in terms of the match in being able to actually integrate and work and provide value between them. There's also the difficulty in leveraging the data for analytics, for AI and machine learning. So being able not only to connect, but even if you do, there is difficulty still in being able to leverage that data and attain additional value out of it. So, the question arises then, how is this the established financial services or the banks? Are they having the same challenges, right? And the answer is yes, they are. As a matter of fact, the preponderance of the respondents, what they said was it's very difficult to integrate into their core banking systems, their ancillary systems, their digital platform. So there's the desire to work together, there's the desire to provide innovation, market need, and value, but there's definitely a hurdle to overcome as a result. So how can this be addressed? Aha, there we go. All right, so InterSystems, we have a Fintech Gateway solution. And what this is actually built on top of our Iris data platform. It's a data fabric. It's a smart data fabric, and John will get into more details around that. But what this facilitates is the ability to have bidirectional movement of data. So it allows you to take data from your legacy systems. It allows you to take that data and connect to the fintechs on the cloud. So it reduces your risk, it improves your time to value, and it allows for both parties to grow their business and provide innovation and solutions to the market as things evolve and needs arise. Yeah, we have one fintech partner that we've worked with, and they early on they partnered with us because of accessibility of bringing data from on-prem and legacy systems to their cloud-based offering. But the other aspect that they were having difficulty with was when the banks were looking, doing their due diligence and security, they did not meet their standard. So we actually helped to supplement and support that, and both parties, as a result, were successful in the implementation.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit from there. So Ian talked about the fact that the Fintech Gateway is based on the IRIS Smart Data Fabric, and the next session actually is going to give you a bit more information about what that actually means in terms of what is a Smart Data Fabric, how does IRIS embody that, where does it get used more broadly. But in the context of the Fintech Gateway, if I just very briefly sort of introduce some of the elements and say more detail to come. One key aspect is obviously that this is bi-directional. So it's taking information from systems that currently exist within the domain within the financial institution and making that available into the domain of the fintech, and vice versa. One of the big problems with integrating with fintechs often is the timeliness of data. So quite often, because as well as the shift of information between system boundaries, there's also physical boundaries, whether it's on-prem to cloud is a very common one. Quite often that data is moved in a batch way because of the impedance that you get within that physical architecture. But the Fintech Gateway allows you to move batch-oriented data, but also it allows you to consume transactional data, whether that's from an operational system that's generating transactions and pushing that information out via an API, or it's the gateway going and obtaining that data on a periodic basis. But also it can consume event streaming data, so whether that's pricing information or fast-moving data from an exchange or some other source of high-velocity data. All of that information can be consumed by the Fintech Gateway and served out in a controlled manner to multiple fintechs, and providing a means not only to do so in a secure way, but a way in which the information flows are audited, they're traceable, they provide the ability to say, okay, what information went to what destination at what point in time, and what was the result of that, what was the response of that, what decisions came back from that fintech. And as we're accumulating that history, that set of data that's going through, commonly one of the problems that you have to address in order to be able to leverage the fintechs the greatest advantage is to normalize your data. Quite often the way in which you're structuring data within a financial institution is not really the way that the fintech wants to consume it. And so within the gateway we have the ability to transform information, to normalize it, to enrich it, to perform processes as that data flows through, to enable not only the normalization and enrichment, but also potentially even governance. If there's information which is deemed to be particularly sensitive, then there might be some sorts of checks and balances you want to put in place on the flows of that data also. All that is encapsulated within the gateway in a way which is very much a low-code environment. So very little actual coding required to implement the sort of reusable components that provide these capabilities.
So, what's the advantages? What does it really do? Well, I think it's an opportunity to kind of reflect on what's, the traditional ways that people integrate and bring data together. So typically, what has happened in the past is, it's laborious, right? There's point-to-point integrations, which is brittle. So it's difficult to change things as well if you have new data sources. The other is the extraction, duplication. So you have, lots of data all over the place, which again is difficult because now you're not sure is that data synchronized? Is it the correct, is it reflecting the correct point in time? So by being able to have this fabric type of facility with the Fintech Gateway, it gives you the ability to have a very agile type environment, and it also increases your speed to value. And it provides real-time scenarios. As John was saying, it can be message streams that are brought into this. It can be operational, transactional, and there's a way to do this where it does not impact the transactional performance and inducing latency. So there's a lot of flexibility and opportunity for success in this usage with the not having the rigid work and laborious tasks that typically in the past have had to come into this type of a scenario.
And what I'm going to do now is just talk about some of the characteristics of the underlying Iris data platform that embodies or the capabilities that make this Fintech Gateway work, and why is Iris particularly suited to this specific use case. First of all, we talked about the fact that the gateway needs to be able to handle data that comes from many sources in many different ways. So what that means is that data is going to look like the representation of the information in those sources. It might be a document representation, it might come as objects, it might be a relational perspective, it might be a CSV file, it might be various other types of way in which data can be represented. And because Iris as a platform is a multi-model database at its heart, the multi-model bit means that that it can consume data in the native form that it is presented, and then not only consume that data, but process it, store it, process it, and serve it out in a way that's useful and meaningful. So Iris can consume documents, can consume objects, can consume transactional information, can consume event streams, can consume many different types of data, and normalize that data, persist that data in a way that's computable and shareable, and also is extremely efficient in the way that data is stored, and then pass it through in near real time to the destination fintechs, and obviously vice versa. Now, because of the way that Iris is multimodal, and because of the way that Iris is particularly efficient in storing data, it works very well as a platform that can not only service this sort of transactional load, this processing load, but also can execute queries on that data at the point where the data is, without replicating the data into another analytic data store. So you can embody dashboarding, for example, giving you information about the form and nature and performance of information flows through the Fintech Gateway, whilst giving you your up-to-date, absolute current perspective on what's happening now, as opposed to what happened 5 minutes ago or half an hour ago or yesterday. And so this mixture of transactional and analytic workloads is an extremely important capability when it comes to the sorts of control and monitoring that you might want to put around the information flows between the internal systems within a financial institution and fintechs, which are most generally hosted in external public cloud sources of platforms of various different types. And in support of those analytics, in support of those dashboarding, there is a number of different analytic capabilities actually within the platform. So it's not just serving data into external analytics tools, but also within Iris, you can express SQL against whatever type of data comes through, but also we can construct cubes, we can apply natural language processing to semi-structured or unstructured data as it comes through the gateway. We can apply machine learning to data as it flows through the model. And by that, and what I mean is, not only can we use the Fintech Gateway to marshal a clean data pipeline of normalized data to go into a training set, which you then use to build a machine learning model, but also within Iris, we can import a trained model using PMML and execute that model close to the data as it flows through the Fintech Gateway. And that can be used for risk management, that can be used for data enrichment, can be used for a whole number of purposes. And that makes the type of organization of that data and the value that you can get out of it within the context of the fintechs that you want to connect to much more valuable, because you can present the data in a way that becomes much more pertinent. And then the final aspect of the Iris that really enables the Fintech Gateway is the connectability, the interoperability, the fact that we can connect to a wide variety of different technologies, whether they're on-premise systems or whether they're cloud-based systems using a wide range of technologies, cloud native or otherwise, and various different processing models, as I said, event streaming, transactional, document-based, whatever you might want to do, and consume that data and push data out to these sources in that same way also, which enables you to bring together this fabric of data which exists within an organization, which we're concentrating into the Fintech Gateway and using those capabilities to attach to and connect to the external fintechs. And that really makes this whole sort of connectivity problem not only simpler to address, but gives you the controls around that connectivity, which means that you can be assured that your data is being used in a safe and controlled way. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit more about Iris. So Iris is this, at its heart, it's an extremely high performance data management platform. It scales enormously, so we've got very high volume use cases, billions of transactions a day. My team did a proof of value recently for one customer where we were consuming, it was about 1.5 to 2 million events a second into an Iris instance, at the same time as serving out tens of thousands of complex queries against that data that we're consuming in real time off one copy of that data. So the data came into Iris, we're persisting it and simultaneously querying it in real time and managing a big query workload against that on a comparatively small number of cores. So we've seen people say that, similar solutions, we're using 300-400 cores in AWS, we managed to do it in 35-40 cores. So we see those economies of scale when it comes to addressing computational workloads. In addition, we see the simplification of architectures. Now, one of my pet sort of hates, if you like, is complex architectures. Reason being, they create a lot of impedance and drag in an organization in terms of agility, and that complexity adds risk, and it adds multiple, increasing number of failure points, all sorts of reasons why we should try and avoid complex architectures. And so the fact that Iris brings this simplification to the party, this ability to encapsulate a number of these capabilities, whether you're using cloud-native services or other types of solution, would require a much greater number of components, would require a much greater number of information flows, would require data being replicated across different data stores, and then, of course, you have those you're introducing those reconciliation problems that were alluded to earlier. Iris allows you to reduce that problem down to a minimum. And I think that that simplification to me adds an enormous amount of value, both from the terms of agility, but also in terms of operational savings. So we're doing this using a database which ultimately is a fully persistent, ACID-compliant database, but it's got the speed of the in-memory databases around. It scales horizontally and vertically, elastically, and transparently, incorporates the analytics, incorporates the integration capabilities, not just the point-to-point at the edges integration that I talked about, but also things like API management, so enabling you to, so if you're, for example, if some of these endpoints into fintechs might be an indeterminate number of users, might be an indeterminate number of accesses, you might want to throttle those or meter those, or have a simple way to version those to out to the external fintechs. So API management layer that's available with Iris will enable you to do that. Orchestrate processes, not only between, or they incorporate manual intervention or people where an event might require it, but also orchestrate interplay between various different connected systems. And that itself adds a lot of value when you're trying to bring together a coordinated data set to give to a fintech or to deliver to a fintech. And in a way that is easy to use by a developer and provides you with a single standard way of working with data, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud of your choice. And again, coming to the point that Ginny made this morning, talking about get that isolation from the specific services and characteristics which are tied into individual clouds, moving you to a space where you can be cloud neutral, cloud independent, multi-cloud. The capabilities of the Iris platform take you to that point. So I've covered a few of these things already, but there's a couple of things that I'd just like to pick out. The multi-model, reducing the requirements to have multiple versions of the data. It's one piece of data, whether it came in a document or an object or a relational transaction. Whatever the format you're looking at it in, the indexing is always consistent and it's always up to date. So if you're processing it in one mode, that processing is reflected in the other modes of access to your data. So it's always consistent. We maintain an ACID guarantee. It runs extremely rapidly. So we can support very high rates of throughput for data. If you're looking to take information flows from an exchange or from a global financial institution and share those with a fintech that's providing some value-added services for you, you don't want the information flows to that fintech to be throttled by a narrow bandwidth pipe. You want to be able to move data at the rate that you're generating it and get the response is back from that fintech in a timescale where it's useful and appropriate and relevant to the users, to the use case for which that data is being shared. And so this ability to move this type of processing at scale, at volume, at speed, is a real sort of a bit of a step change in terms of enablement, because quite often people, you can, it's relatively simple to put together a solution which connects one endpoint to the other, but in order to be able to do that at scale and in a controlled way, and that will not impede the growth of the business, that's very different. And Iris brings those capabilities because of the flexibility and performance of the underlying platform. One really valuable piece of technical capability that Iris has, which quite often gets underestimated a little bit, is sort of schema independence of data. So we can bring in schemaless data. We can consume data which gets persisted according to the native organization of that data without necessarily being circumscribed by a predefined schema, a set of relational tables, for example. And similarly, once that data is within Iris, you can apply a schema of your choice as you access that data. And that schema might be in the form of a document model, might be in the form of a JSON document, might be in the form of a relational schema that you want to view it through. But those schemas are flexible. And that gives you not only a flexibility in consuming data, but also serving it out. And then finally, the fact that Iris is enormously resource efficient. I talked about the fact that we see this drop from 300, 400 calls down to 30 or 40 for processing very high volumes of data. We see that across the board with all our customers, that their ability to handle very large workloads with very cost-effective physical implementations is marked, a big differentiator. And scalability and elasticity is something that everybody talks about and is high on a number of people's agendas because it enables you to save costs. If you can flex your services according to demand, as opposed to having to provision according to the highest peak for the 24 hours a day, then obviously that potentially can save you a significant amount of money. So Iris gives you the ability to elastically scale, and this is particularly relevant as we move to an era where the use of Kubernetes, for example, as a container deployment architecture is becoming more widespread, and we can fire up another container, another instance. That automatically becomes part of that distributed cluster and is data aware, and we see a single consistent representation of data across that cluster, and we maintain an asset guarantee for transactions across that cluster. So one of the things that is again a differentiator for the Iris platform is that as you scale out using these sort of clustering capabilities, then we retain the asset guarantee on that data. So it's not a case of, well, eventually it's going to be consistent. At some point in the future, when you put a transaction in, that's going to be propagated across however many nodes you might have. When you do the transaction into an Iris cluster, it's guaranteed, and everybody sees this. When somebody reads that data, they're all going to read the same data. So we retain that atomicity of transactions, which makes it a lot easier to be sure that you've got the right data being made available at all the time to all the various different consumers. A little bit more about the analytic capabilities that I talked about earlier, and really one of the things that I'd like to bring out here is the integrated ML. I talked about the fact that you can import a machine learning model, or sorry, a trained model that's derived from a machine learning process into Iris and run it close to the data as that data is flowing through the platform. And part of that capability is this set of functions that we have that's labeled integrated ML. And really what that does is it allows you to simply and easily incorporate not just a model execution, but also a complete sort of data science cycle into the platform. So you can create a model, you can train a model, you can consume and process a model, and you can do that solely within Iris, or you can do that, communicating to external execution environments if you wish to. Some of the AutoML capabilities in public cloud, for example, or third-party platforms like DataRobot or other providers, and that gives you the ability to really sort of, as I say, bring and apply the fruits of machine learning directly to the data as it flows through the platform. Why is that important? Well, that's really important because what it does is it reduces the latency. So if you're having to, every time you get a piece of data coming through, make an external call to, via some API, which is commonly the way people do this, to an external system, which then says, okay, I've got the data, I'll think about it, I'll apply a model, and here's the result, and that comes back via a response to that API call. You're introducing quite a lot of latency into your transactional flow. Now, if volumes are low and time's not critical, then that might not matter. But as things ramp up, it starts to count, and it can make a big difference to throughput. The fact that we can tie this closely to the data, to the way the data is being processed. So this is all about bringing analytics to the data, and it's something that we do a lot of within the Iris platform. not just through the incorporation of machine learning in a way that's tightly bound to data, but also being able to construct cubes dynamically and surface dashboards built on those cubes that are updated dynamically, whether it's providing data visual tools to allow data analysts to explore data and again dynamically build virtual cubes which adapt to the type of query that are going against those automatically without the needing any involvement from a database administrator build indexes behind the scene. Adaptive analytics will automatically do that for you. And the first time you throw a query into it, it'll be slow. Then behind the scenes, it starts to build indexes, starts to build aggregates. So the second time you push the query in, it's faster. Third time, it's faster still. And then you can surface those virtual cubes into the visualization tool or engine of your choice. Now, okay, I think I've probably talked enough about that. Interoperability. Let's come back to interoperability a little bit, because obviously, in the context of the Fintech Gateway, interoperability is largely the problem domain that we're trying to address. And this uses, again, the built-in capabilities within the IRIS platform to address the interoperability requirements of the Fintech Gateway use case. So whether that's integrating with data sources, whether that's integrating with applications, whether they're on-prem, whether they're in the cloud, there's a set of pre-built componentry to do that and to make that simple. It's a single architecture for doing all that interoperability, no matter what the data source. Again, coming back to whether it's coming from a transactional system, whether it's coming from an ETL source, whether it's coming from an event streaming source, it's the same architecture, it's the same tooling. As the data flows through the platform, it looks the same, and we can work on it using the same tools and capabilities in a consistent manner, in an audited manner, in a controlled manner, in a traceable manner, in a secure manner. So we have this security of data, this persistence of data, we can guarantee not to lose data, we can ensure that whatever flows through can be fully audited and traced after the event. So should something happen somewhere within the domain of the institution and they want to know who saw what piece of information when or what bit of information triggered something to happen, then we have that data available. And indeed, one of the things that we're currently doing within the integrated ML space is doing a lot of work to make it easier to support explainability. So there's been a lot of work done in the past few years about explainable AI, because 5-10 years ago, most AI models were black boxes. Something went in and something came out, and no one really understood what happened in the middle. But now there's a lot of work going on to ensure that the decisions or the recommendations or the predictions that the model produces can be explainable. And you don't have to write a whole separate analytics suite around them to try and say, well, does it look like this is exhibiting bias or not, which is the way that people used to do it. That's now starting to be built into these models, and we're making that simply and easily accessible using the integrated ML framework. Right, so as the data flows through the platform, one of the things that often needs to happen to it is not only we connecting to the endpoints in whatever form they are, but that data may have to be transformed. It may have to go, you may want to normalize it, you may want to enrich it, you certainly quite often want to restructure it. And so there is a set of sort of graphically based capabilities in order to do that, whether that's looking at complex business processing, whether that's looking at data transforming, whether that's looking at normalizing it through a standard data model. There's graphical utilities within the platform to do that. These all create reusable components which can be simply and easily maintained without the need for a developer to get hands-on and writing code. And indeed, we're doing some work with a customer of ours at the moment to replace a sort of traditional sort of industry scale messaging bus with the IRIS platform for exactly this reason, because it gives them the independence from having to have developers getting down and dirty with low-level code. It gives them a lot of the capabilities that they're lacking that we've just described in this case. Okay, and then finally, developer-friendly. The idea is that, you know, we make this platform easy to use. We don't want to make it hard for people to get to grips with. You can work largely with the tools of your choice. I mean, the most commonly used development environment tool at the moment is VS Code, and we support, you know, plugins for VS Code, also other IDEs should you wish to use them. We support natively within the platform a scripting language called ObjectScript, but also now Python, but also you can work closely with other languages such as Java and the .NET Stack and other C++ and other languages that can be sort of either working next to and alongside or connected to the platform, or even invoked directly from within the platform. So you can extend the platform not just across data boundaries between different systems, but also start to link the gateway into business logic that's resident in different technologies within your institution. And that actually is quite a powerful thing to do, because then you can start to not only base the integration with fintechs on data flows, but also you can start to more readily incorporate business logic into that processing, into that integration. And so we have, via this sort of wide sort of technical integration capability or technology capabilities, you know, it increases the scope of the work that you can do. Finally, obviously there's a lot of reuse out there. We've got a big developer community that's continuing to grow and continue to share artifacts. So that supports the working with the gateway. Deployment is all about, you can deploy it wherever you want it to go. It can be deployed on-premise, it can be deployed in the cloud, it can be deployed across multiple clouds. It gives you independence from the location because it presents a single way of working wherever you are. So you're not tied into a particular Amazon service or a particular Azure service or a particular GCP service. You can use the IRIS platform, the Fintech Gateway, as a common lingua franca for talking to your internal systems and all the various cloud-based platforms that are out there. Okay, I think that's probably enough from me.
Okay, so as John explained, there's a lot of pieces in the IRIS data platform, and I want to share with you. So IRIS, InterSystems IRIS was actually released in 2018, so about 4 years ago. And many of you know us. We've been in the software business and have had excellent technology software that we've offered. So why was IRIS built, right? Let's answer that question. So we worked with a number of institutions, a number of financial services institutions, and their desire was to have a platform that would support many areas of work. So what they said was, we have to bring in all these point solutions. We have to have separate skill sets. We have to integrate it. It costs us more because now we have to, duplicate lots of times. And so if there was a way to have something that would encompass many areas of work, functionality, and be efficient, and give us the ability to evolve our applications over time, that would be awesome. So there you go. That's IRIS, and if you look at IRIS spelled backwards is Siri. So yes, we answer all your questions and provide all the capabilities. There you go. The one other interesting point, and then I'll get on to the case studies, is we do partner. We're cloud neutral. We partner with many cloud providers. And we've actually been brought in by our cloud partners in scenarios where they have very high performance, low latency critical reliability requirements, and they're also competing, with other cloud providers. So the costs for the infrastructure, where they really need to show that price performance value, we've actually been brought in by our partners to support them in those use cases. Okay, so let's talk about some of the use cases and how people are applying our technology, in particular the Smart Data Fabric. This use case is an investment manager. It's actually part of a large investment bank. And what they needed to do was to bring together a whole bunch of different data assets that they had. And that included, different asset classes. They wanted to be able to look at what was happening in terms of, post-trade scenarios, bring in some market data, look at rebalancing portfolios, and be able to do on-the-fly aggregations and postings as well as positions. So having the capacity to have the ability to connect all these sources, having the capacity to bring the data together in a real-time form in many cases was essential to them. And also another piece, we spoke about regulatory requirements. Well, of course, being able to generate the regulatory reports, being able to generate these reports as the data requirements changed and the reports themselves evolved was also very important. What they looked at was, we're always in a competitive situation, right? I'd love to say that everybody just decides InterSystems Iris is the right choice and, our data fabric architectural approach, and there's never any competition. So there were several competitors, and I'll exemplify some of these through the other use cases. But what happened was, again, when they looked at all the pieces that they would have to bring together to facilitate this, it became so burdensome and costly that it just didn't make sense. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This is a organization that's actually in South America, and they provide branded credit cards and loyalty programs. And so they started their business. They're a fairly new organization, fairly young company. And so they started their business. They built all of their architecture on open source technologies. Well, sounds good, right? Seems like it would work. What happened was that as they were growing and they had more retailers that they partnered with, they had more users, there were more queries and more transactions, it was actually up to 20 seconds for them to be able to update the information. And not only that, what would also happen is they would have outages because they couldn't handle the concurrency requirements and the transactional volumes. So we came in and we helped them. And I love this quote, right? Is their CEO, "My cell phone does not ring." So, I mean, maybe you like having your cell phone ring, but, in this case, he was able to spend the weekend in peace. This one is, I'll mention the name of this particular one. And this is a very large fintech, Broadridge, which many of you might recognize. They're about $5 billion in revenue, and they process $7 trillion in equities and fixed income trades per day. And so they partnered with UBS, the largest global wealth manager. And in this partnership, what they were looking to do was to build the next generation wealth management, comprehensive wealth management utility entirely on the cloud. And the requirements were, of course, they were pretty stringent. They were doing, Broadridge is known for post-trade, but in this case, they're actually doing the trading as well. So what they needed to do was to bring together all sorts of data sources, right? You have Broadridge's, you have UBS, and be able to capture that data and support a very low latency, high reliability, super stringent in terms of their RTO numbers. What they looked at, again, there's lots of, between the two organizations, you can imagine, there's lots of technologies, right? And they also had technologies they were looking at. This is being built on, I should say, on AWS. So they looked at all sorts of technologies. Well, why not use this? Why not use that? Okay, so end of the day, right? They did some evaluations and comparison, because it really all comes down to what are the SLA, what are the future needs and requirements as they look to UBS is the partner, but there's other customers, several of them, and perhaps some of the audience here, you might be one of the ones in the queue that are going to be partnering in working with them. So anyhow, what they looked at was, what does this impact in terms of what our needs are to support the number of transactions, to support the concurrency, to support the SLAs, and what are the cost factors involved in the complexity. So when they looked at Iris compared to some of the other technologies, what they found, we were able to really simplify their architecture, replace many pieces of separate technologies. This allowed them not only to reduce the complexity and increase the reliability, less breaking points, it also saved them money. You're not having to spend X amount of money to have all these additional areas of infrastructure that you have to support, plus a much faster time to market. And the bottom line, in comparison, we used only 30% of the infrastructure that they had planned and increased their performance by 9x. So, pretty sweet story, I would say. So those are my examples of use cases. And what I'd like to do next is open it up for questions. Yes?
Seems to me that if you are combining lots of data from different sources, the quality of the data from different sources may vary.
Mm-hmm.
So does the built-in analytics capabilities and so on you have, do you have the ability to manage data quality across a wide range of sources and perhaps weight the analytics according to how high quality the data going into it is? So you can specify more data of a lower quality or less data of a higher quality. Does that sort of thing make sense?
I think if you're looking at that sort of problem, which is a data quality problem, then that's probably more in the domain of sort of fundamental analysis rather than the more operationally oriented analytics that we do in the context of the Fintech Gateway. I mean, the answer is yes, but whether you'd want to do that in the Fintech Gateway scenario is, I think, a different question.
Okay, I was just wondering, I guess, about the scope of the platform.
Yeah. So absolutely the answer is yes in that case, just for in terms of the underlying platform itself, yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, yes, please.
Thank you. I must admit, I didn't really get a sense of what the Fintech Gateway actually is. Are we talking about a toolbox? Something that is deployed somewhere on the customer side, or is it really more a concept of these are, as you explained, in your presentation, of the underlying Iris capabilities? If you take those together, then you can build such a thing, or is there a thing as that Fintech Gateway?
So there's pre-built components. So you're right, underlying structure is the Iris platform, but there's adapters and there's the capability to connect to and do transformations, harmonizations of that data to make it available to the fintechs on the cloud. So it is an architectural pattern that's offered with underlying components that are pre-built. So it's no code, as John was saying, so you can visually do some of these integrations, and it's customizable over time. So if you wanted to do other areas of inclusion, it's available to you as well.
Yeah, and what we've seen is the number of those components is increasing over time. So, for example, we now have a set of components that integrate with streaming services much more capably, or have more out of the box than we used to have, whether it's Kafka or the other streaming services within the cloud platforms. And they're incorporated in this. And we have application partners who have used Iris as the Fintech Gateway for their cloud-based offering. We also have other financial institutions that are taking this pattern and putting it firmly within the scope of the institution and replacing existing, I won't call them legacy, but sort of long-standing messaging infrastructures that they do a variety of, or meeting a variety of integration needs with, and putting Iris in, following this pattern and using the components that we have to enable them to much more appropriately and agilely address their integration requirements.
Any other?
From an NLP perspective, is it multi-language?
Yes. There is a finite set of languages that it supports, but yes, it's multi-language. You can pay me a lot of money and I'll come along and do the COBOL for you. I started up my life as a COBOL programmer many years ago.
So was I.
Good question. Good ask. Any others? Okay, so let's move on to our next portion of the presentation. And this is, so Joe Lichtenberg, who is our Global Product Marketing Director, he's recorded a session on what the data fabric is, right? And what, unfortunately, he could not participate here, so therefore that's why he recorded this. He's actually at the Gartner IT Expo in Orlando. I'm meeting with Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, whoever. Anyway, so I think you'll find this to be quite interesting in terms of, what is the data fabric positioning, what do we do? And in addition to that, there's a use case example, which is a client, an asset management client. They recently presented with us at the Gartner Data and Analytics event, and they're called Harris. They're part of Natixis, which is, I think, the third largest bank in France, if I recall correctly. And so what they wanted to do was they had many disparate systems, right? And they also wanted to be able to bring in real-time information, because what they were doing is they had to rely on internal teams that would aggregate, normalize the data, render this information for them for analytics, for reporting purposes, but it would be after the fact. It wouldn't give them the information that they needed as things were happening, or give them the flexibility in terms of changes as the business demanded. They looked at 11 different technologies and solutions. Some of these were packaged solution offerings. Some of them were technologies that could be customized or built upon. And then they narrowed the selection down to 3. We were one of the 3, and asked the 3 vendors to do a proof of value. So they ended up selecting us. And the reason that they selected us was not only because we gave them this capacity to have this 360 business understanding and view, we also gave them the capacity to not have a rigid model. So they were able to change this over time as they needed and customize it to their needs. And so, there's an interesting presentation that Joe will go through that describes this in more detail. So let me go ahead and play this.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Joe Littenberg, Global Product Marketing Director for Data Management Software, based out of corporate here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I'm delighted to be able to present to you today on Smart Data Fabric, enabling future innovation in financial services. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'd like to talk to you about what we're seeing in terms of how financial services organizations are leveraging this Smart Data Fabric architecture to address a variety of different initiatives. And I think, as most or maybe all of you here are aware, InterSystems has been in the data management space now for 43 years. We have thousands of customers, and we work with many financial services organizations around the world and in virtually every subsector in financial services to solve a wide range of challenges for them. And so we have pretty good visibility into the space. But even so, what we like to do is we regularly conduct detailed research surveys to get an even more complete and detailed understanding of the key challenges and initiatives that financial services organizations globally are working through right now. And so I'd like to start this afternoon by talking about 2 different research surveys with financial services organizations that we recently conducted. So in the first survey, we surveyed 554 line of business executives from financial services organizations around the world. And I'd like to share some of these findings with you. So one of the most striking results from the survey is that 86% of these line of business executives reported that they lack confidence in using their data for decision making. And if you look at the data on the left, the #1 reason that they reported is they say it takes too long to access the data, by which time the data is outdated. And if you look at the data on the right, it might be a little hard to read, but if you look at that first slice of the pie chart from 12 o'clock to about 1 o'clock, you can see that only 5% of the data that's used for decision making is less than an hour old. If you look at those first 2 slices going clockwise, only 18% is less than 5 hours old. And if you add up those first 3 slices, it turns out that 63% of the data that line of business executives are using to make decisions is more than a day old. It's not even intraday. And so I think, as we know, with market disruptions and even black swan events that are happening with ever greater frequency and volatility, the Fed acts, Elon Musk tweets something else, then he tweets again, OPEC just met. All of these events are happening, with greater and greater frequency. And as we know, the market response to these events happens instantaneously. And so end of day and even intraday information is often insufficient, right? So firms need to be able to act in the moment based on these gyrations that happen over the course of the day. And in fact, in the survey, the #1 technology priority for the next 12 months that was reported by the majority of firms is gaining access to real-time data across the business for improved decision making. On the left, if you look at these additional responses in terms of the frustrations and concerns that these line of business executives have when it comes to using data to drive decision making. I can't get the data from all of the needed sources, so that's a data silos and an integration and an interoperability challenge. I can't get the information in the format that I need, so that's a flexibility problem, but that's also a business user self-service problem, enabling the decision makers, the line of business folks in the organization, to be able to get the information in a useful format so that they can make decisions. I can't report on all the data, and I have to make assumptions and summarize the data, and it loses the granularity. All right, so this is in large part a data scalability challenge, but it's also the way that a lot of these integration technologies and data marts and data warehouses are designed, in that you need to summarize and aggregate the data and pull the details out of the data, which makes it difficult to really drill in and understand root cause analysis. I can't explore and analyze and interrogate the information myself, and I need support from IT. So that's around data democratization, and also putting self-service tools in the hands of the business user so that they can get the answers that they need. And I can't find the information that I need. So that's a data search and a data accessibility problem. Now, similarly, we ran another research survey, this time with IT executives, as compared with line of business executives, to get their view on where their challenges are. So this is a survey of 250 IT executives from financial services organizations, and they reported as the #1 barrier to innovation the existence of data silos. So 62% say providing improved access to siloed distributed data is one of the top concerns. Then the next two responses around providing secure data access to employees at every level of the organization, and the fact that their IT staff spends between 25 and 50% of their time helping other staff access the data and the insights that they require, really talks to, again, data democratization and business user self-service. And if you look at where the planned spend is going forward in the data management space, it's around visualization, business user self-service, and integration. So we see a fair amount of commonality between line of business and IT in the need to solve these data challenges. And by the way, you can access both of these surveys on our website at intersystems.com/fs-surveys, or you can scan that QR code on the screen. And there's other surveys on that landing page as well that you may be interested in. So with that as a backdrop, for those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, in some cases for multiple decades, like myself, we might ask, right, so these aren't new problems, are they? And indeed, they're not, right? I mean, we know that businesses have been wrestling with exactly these challenges for decades, right? How to best connect the consumers of the data, including business users and your data scientists and your quants and your customers and your partners and even your applications, with real-time and consistent data that is distributed in silos inside and outside the organization to meet a whole range of different business initiatives. And as we all know, there have been many different technologies and techniques to try to address these challenges, like manual coding and batch copying of data and point-to-point connections and spreadsheets, and even data lakes and data warehouses and data marts. And yet, all of these approaches have limitations. And as we know from our experience and as we saw from the surveys, still these challenges remain, and they're pervasive. So that's why we wanted to talk to you today about this exciting new architectural approach that specifically addresses these and other challenges. Gartner and really all of the other top analysts are calling it an enterprise data fabric or a data fabric, what we call a smart data fabric, and they're all recommending this architectural approach. In fact, Gartner recently was quoted as saying that a data fabric is the future of data management, right? So why is that? So this approach, this architectural approach, is fundamentally different from all of these other prior approaches in that it connects the consumers of the data to all of the source systems and data stores on demand, eliminating the latencies and the complexities that are usually associated with all of these prior approaches. So with a smart data fabric, real-time data, including event data and transactional data, can be combined with historical data and data from your production applications, operational data, data from external data providers, and even using as source data from your existing data lakes and data silos and other data management approaches that you've implemented previously. So it's non-disruptive, right? There's no rip and replace. It can use any of your internal and external sources to feed this smart data fabric. And it's dynamic, so the data can be ingested on demand as it's needed by the various consumers and applications. And in real time, in this dynamic data layer, it can have various processes applied to it for things like data transformation and integration and data pipelining to integrate the data into a consistent format, and then have a wide range of analytics applied to it, including analytic SQL and business rules and business intelligence, and even predictive and prescriptive analytics, right? Machine learning models and so forth, all on demand, right as the data is being accessed from these source systems. So it's a fundamentally different approach from these batch moving and copying of data that we've seen in the past. And by the way, the ability to embed the analytics directly within the data fabric without having to move the data to a different environment or copy the data is what makes it smart. That puts the smart into the smart data fabric, right? And with the smart data fabric, there's a common metadata and semantic layer, and it allows you to track the full lineage of the data moving through the system, right? And then the data and the analytics that's now fit for purpose can be presented to business users in a variety of formats via live and interactive dashboards that allow your business users to drill into the information to ask new questions, can be presented to data scientists and analysts for their use. And so we see this as a secure data science workbench that provides your data scientists with the data and the tools to be able to experiment with the data and build and tune their machine learning models. And also presented to your customers and your partners in the appropriate format and with the appropriate security, and also to feed your applications with live, accurate, and integrated data. Another really powerful capability in what we provide for enabling a smart data fabric is a rich development environment. And so built into this data fabric, you have the capabilities to build new composite applications that pull live data from a variety of sources and apply a whole variety of different types of processing, including various types of analytics, to build applications for what we call Business 360, which is providing a complete comprehensive view of what's happening inside your business, customer 360 for understanding your customers based on the information that you have, enriched with data from outside sources, what we call institutional client 360, which is really a B2B version of customer 360 if you have institutional clients, and a whole range of applications around regulatory reporting and risk and pre-trade analytics and historical trade analytics to look for the best way to route trades going forward, compliance, and so forth. So at InterSystems, here is a sort of a common way to think about what we're seeing from our customers. And that is that a smart data fabric enables what we call the 4 Ps of data and analytics. And if there's any marketers in the room, it's not product, price, place, and promotion. It's panoramic, predictive, prescriptive, and programmatic. And so panoramic is about providing a real-time, consistent, and integrated view of what's happening inside and outside the organization. Predictive, of course, is data-driven predictions about what's likely to occur. So is a high-value customer at risk of walking out the door? What's the probability that you're going to breach your risk utilization limit in your portfolio? Or that one of your portfolio companies has a high degree of risk around ESG criteria, and there's a good chance that that may impact the stock price and impact your portfolio, right? So running predictive analytics across a whole range of scenarios. And then prescriptive, which is a little bit different from predictive. Prescriptive analytics is using data-driven, actionable insights to prevent problems from occurring before they do, and then to provide data-driven guidance on how to best remedy problems when they do occur, right? And sometimes the right action in an organization is to use these prescriptive analytics, these actionable insights, to empower the people in the business that have the experience to use this data and make the right decisions. So for example, if there are predictions around something that may happen with an unacceptable level of risk, so breaching a risk limit, and you want to take action in advance, and you provide your risk managers with prescriptive guidance based on what's happened in the past and the outcomes in the past. Yet you don't want those actions to happen programmatically. You want to empower your experienced risk managers to use that data to make the right decisions. So that's prescriptive. But there's also programmatic. So sometimes it makes more sense to take programmatic actions in real time. So that may be because it is a real-time scenario like fraud detection or pre-trade algorithms around risk and concentration rules. But sometimes we see, it's an efficiency play. So there may not be a need for a person to be in the loop. And so automating processes with programmatic actions can increase operational efficiencies and improve the organization and the bottom line. So that's what we see as 4 common scenarios, what we call the 4 Ps of data and analytics, that are enabled by a smart data fabric. And any application or use case or organization may use any or all of these scenarios. So with that, I'd like to take you through 2 examples from our customers that are relevant and I hope you find interesting. So the first is our customer, Harris Associates. So Harris Associates is a financial services asset management firm. So they manage about $100 billion in investments and portfolios for their clients, and they also own a mutual fund company, Oakmark Funds, that some of you may have heard of. Some of you may actually have some of your assets invested with Oakmark Funds. And so Harris is working with us to implement a smart data fabric architecture to address a number of different challenges. So one is for what they call business and client reporting, what we call Business 360 here at InterSystems, where they're pulling together data from multiple different systems to provide their internal business users with the real-time information that they need to run the business. They're providing their clients with the information that they need. They're providing their quants, or their data scientists and their analysts, with the data and the tools that they need to optimize their trading strategies. And it's also feeding their internal applications. So Harris has lots of different source systems and data, including performance and attribution data that comes from their internal systems. Their CRM data is in Salesforce. They have investment accounting data. They have subscription data. They have redemption data. And they even use streaming market data from providers like Bloomberg and others. And so all of this distributed and dissimilar data flows through their smart data fabric architecture, where we integrate and harmonize and analyze the data, and then feed all of those consumers with the data and the real-time insights that they need on demand. So we're providing real-time insights to their internal front office business users in an accurate and real-time and consistent manner, and in a format where their internal users can ask questions and drill into the data. They can provide their clients with an exceptional experience by making the data available to partners and customers, and enable their quants then to optimize their trading strategies to help deliver alpha to their clients, right? And they chose this approach because it's fundamentally different from the other approaches that they looked at. One, it's extremely flexible, so they weren't boxed in with what they get with packaged applications. And it's able to allow them to explore the data and answer the new questions that they didn't know to ask, which is very different from a data mart or a data warehouse, providing the sort of power and flexibility to ask the next question and the next question and the next, without having to sort of aggregate and pre-process the data specifically to answer questions that are known in advance. And Harris also uses the same smart data fabric to perform what they call trade cost analysis. And by the way, a big advantage of this smart data fabric architecture is this one dynamic data layer can support many different users and use cases. And so with a trade cost analysis application, Harris compares all of their historical stock transactions, which is a very large data set, against an even larger data set, against terabytes of market data for every similar trade that executed across the entire market during those trade intervals, to quantify how well the various brokers performed relative to every other similar trade that executed at that same time. Then they use all of that data to build machine learning models to predict which brokers would have given them the best execution for each trade. And then they embed these prescriptive models into their algorithmic trading processes so that they can route the orders that come in real time to the best broker in real time to get the best price with the lowest fees for every trade based on those predictive and prescriptive models that they've built. And then they're constantly recalibrating these models based on the ongoing trade performance data. And so the result is that they say they're able to minimize their trading costs, saving them millions of dollars every year, and ultimately providing better returns for their clients. And so the second customer use case that I'd like to take you through is from another customer, Financial Center First Credit Union, or they refer to themselves as FCFCU. So FCFCU is a credit union. They've been serving its members for more than 60 years. They have more than 68,000 members, and they manage about $1 billion in assets under management. And according to FCFCU, their focus is first and foremost on helping their members, right? So they do well as a company by doing the right thing for their members. And so a couple of years ago, when the pandemic hit, they were actually forced to close all their physical customer service locations to comply with their local laws and guidelines. And so when their locations went dark, it was a real problem for them. They were no longer able to service their members in person through their outlets and their storefronts, which was the primary way that they interacted with them. And so for a company that prides itself on their deep personal relationships with their members, this presented a big challenge. They knew that some of their members would be having financial difficulties during the pandemic, with health problems and layoffs and businesses closing and so forth. And so they needed to find a new way where they could proactively identify those members that might be at risk and find ways to help them, even though they could no longer see them in person. So what they did is they created what they call the We Care initiative to do that. And so they have lots of historical data that they can analyze. They've actually been using InterSystems technology for a really long time. They're now running on InterSystems Iris. And so they have all of this historical data that they can analyze. And then they took advantage of the embedded machine learning and predictive analytics capabilities that they have with InterSystems Iris that's built into the fabric. And so they built predictive models that analyze dozens of different behavioral metrics for things like recent transactions and payment history and loan applications and credit card advances. And then they're executing these models and using the results to arm their We Care customer support teams to then proactively contact members that these models predicted would be at risk of having financial difficulties and offer each member personalized solutions and services that would best cater to their needs. So what's the result? So as a result, they help thousands of members defer their loan payments, thousands more to refinance their loans. And as a byproduct of helping their members through these difficult times, they actually had their best lending year in history. And they surpassed all of their previous total revenue records. So it's a really great example of a company that does well by doing good. So hopefully that was helpful and interesting. We actually have many customers in many different sectors in financial services as well as in other industries. As I think most of you know, here's just a subset of some of our customers in financial services. If you'd like to talk about any of these customer implementations, Anne and the team here would be happy to do so. Again, I think as most of you are aware, InterSystems has operations and customers in more than 80 countries. We have 35 offices around the world, including here in the UK and in Ireland. We're headquartered where I am in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And among the many customer implementations we have, we're powering the order management system for one of the largest investment banks in the world, where they're processing 2 billion real-time stock transactions every single day with bulletproof reliability. There's never been a slowdown, a dropped trade, or an outage for the last 15 years while we've been powering their real-time trading system. We have more than 7 million production licenses, 150,000 plus deployments, and we have more than 1,200 ISV and application partners. And as I think everybody is aware, we pride ourselves on very high-touch, white-glove service with our customers. In fact, Gartner recently publicly quoted that all of our reference customers said they would recommend it to others. If you'd like more information, you can go to intersystems.com/financial, or you can simply scan that QR code. Again, I hope this was helpful. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions, or to Anne and the team here today. Thank you.
Okay. So I do hope that was, gave you a little bit more insight. And we're at the conclusion of our financial services track. But I did want to open it up to you, the participants, and ask you if you had any questions or comments or anything, that you would like to share. There's a lot of information that's been presented. And at times, I think it's also very difficult to really delve into things, at the detail that might resonate with what you're doing. So I do hope and welcome the opportunity to continue the conversation and exploration between us. Yes, please.
Is it fair to describe this data fabric as the evolution of the old idea of a database management system, a data store with services attached to it?
To some extent, I would agree. I think it, as you saw, it really encompasses a very rich amount of functionality outside of that, and the interoperability piece of it is key, especially when you look at the architecture for a data fabric.
But it seems to me that the key thing about this, I was a DBA once, is the underlying data store, the sparse matrix. You actually abstract the logical model of the data from the underlying physical model. And that seemed to me to be fundamental to how databases are supposed to work. And every other database sort of compromised on that and started storing stuff in columns and rows.
Yes, very, very good and valid point. The other side of this is that when you look at something like a Fintech Gateway, and so we partner, one of the companies we partner with, I don't know if you're familiar, is with Uncork, right? And Uncork is a no-code platform in the cloud, and basically what they wanted to do was to bring data without storing it, right, as a pass-through. So we're the intermediary that's helping to provide that link in terms of bringing in the data, providing, the capture, transformation, harmonization. But we're not, you can maintain it for audit purposes, for query purposes, whatnot, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
So you're a very intelligent cache.
In a sense, it could be looked at that, yeah, which is elastic, horizontal scale, there you go.
I think the key to it is that you're not trying to create another data repository. The reality is that the data stays in the core systems, but you surface the data based on a use case where it is needed and at the right time. And not all of data is needed for any particular use cases, unlike the conventional approach where essentially people went down this line of traditional data warehouses where they said, okay, these are 10 transactional source systems. Let me get data out of them and put them in one single place and figure out what I need to do with it. I think so the key part to this aspect is that essentially you're determining your data needs based on user needs as opposed to doing that as an afterthought. So the key thing is you're bringing data to the query as opposed to the query to the data. So I guess the reality is that you're surfacing the data based on the need, whether it's real time, whether it's batch or whatever it is, but you're not trying to create another repository, because what people don't want is another repository of information where they again have to worry about duplicacy of data and governance around that.
Well, you want a federated database where the stuff stays where it is, but logically it's supposed to where you're using it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, I hope you found this to be interesting. I think there was some very good exchange of information and backdrop in terms of the challenges and the research that was done. And Virginia, thank you for your earlier presentation, and Callie, of course, as well. And as I said, there was quite a bit discussed, but the best way to really see if there's any opportunity for synergies is to have a direct conversation. So I welcome that, and the team here. Tim, if you take a bow here, please do reach out, and thank you for your participation.